The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep, open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have a show that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time. And going back to almost the very first year that I started doing this show, I had a few people that said that they would like to see some more native voices on the show, talking about the folklore and representing the heritage, and not just having some random dude talk about all the different folklore and everything, myself being that person, of course. I've had the opportunity to have Tom Seawood on, talking about a lot of the Sasquatch stuff going on up in the Northwest. But today for you guys, I actually have somebody that's coming from a totally different region talking about a totally different phenomenon. I have somebody who has spent his entire life on the Navajo reservations, and he's had endless experiences with a little thing that everybody likes to talk about but has a lot of confusion with, called the Skinwalker. But before we get into this fascinating episode today, just a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, I'm sure that you guys have seen that I've been kind of spacey on releases lately. I had to get some stuff sorted out for myself as far as the direction that I wanted to go with this podcast, what I wanted to focus on. And I know I kind of go in these spurts here and there, but I think I know exactly what I'm going to try to do with this podcast. And I am going to try to do a little bit better as far as making clips to get some more growth and bring some more people into the show and everything. But just letting you guys know, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for the long run. The show isn't going anywhere, and I apologize for the spaces in releases lately. But that being said, I'm coming back full heat with a lot of fantastic guests for you guys. Got a lot of awesome stuff lined up for you guys. And with that lineup, of course, is the new live Bizarre Inquiries episodes. And the next one will be happening on April 3rd. And that'll be on the Open Minds Media YouTube channel, and that'll be happening at about 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to pop in and check that one out, we would greatly appreciate it. Had a pretty good amount of people last time. Hopefully we're going to keep just expanding that number every single time. You know, grassroots is how this show grows, and anything that you guys do, I more than appreciate. And if anybody wants to make their mark on that specific episode, you guys can drop us some articles, some clips, some questions to discuss. And if any of you guys want to do that, you guys can get up with me sending those through email, social media, contact form on the link tree, whatever way that you guys find the show. Just don't forget to get a hold of me, because I would love to be able to discuss what you guys want us to discuss on that show. Just one last quick message before we get into the show. If anyone would like to be a guest on the show, or if anybody has had an encounter or experience that they would like to share on the show, or possibly even have me investigate, you guys can email me at inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com. Or you guys get a hold of me through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones I'm the most active on. Or you guys can always call or text the hotline. That number is 313-364-1551. And every single thing that I mention and will mention throughout the show is all available in the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome to the show for his very first appearance, and hopefully going to be more, paranormal investigator, Shaneclen. How's it going today, man?
Doing good, doing good. Had a very stressful day at my normal day job, but I'm very excited and happy to be here.
Hey, man, sometimes it takes a good conversation, though, to get you out of that funk. That's always my thing, man. Like, work can suck, but if I go home to a good conversation, like, it kind of makes up for at least the tail end of the day.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I was looking forward to this all day. Like, I was going through work and I was just like, just get through it, and then we're going to have a kick-ass conversation on this podcast and everything. So I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, I'm glad you don't overkill it, man, because I know when I originally tried to set you up, you said you don't like going on too many podcasts and all that stuff, because it'll start becoming like a chore after a while. But if you ain't doing them too often, man, like, I'm glad you're actually looking forward to it, because sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I just did 3 yesterday, 3 the day before. Some people just got no energy coming in, man.
Yeah, so I'm all ready for it, man. So like I got my monster, got my tobacco here, so I'm all ready for it, bro.
Perfect. So I guess a good spot to start off. And like I said, we were saying before the show, man, I'm super excited to have you on the show because you're going to be the first person talking from like your cultural background and everything on the show about some of the folklore and stuff. But before we get into the nitty gritty of the conversation, I like laying down some of the groundwork so people kind of know where you're coming from, who you are, what you do if they've never heard of you. So why don't you let people know a little bit about yourself and how you got into exactly what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Shanclen. Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Excuse me. Sorry. My name is Shanclen. Translate out in English means the warrior who walks in the shadows. So I earned that name through a lot of the trials and tribulations of life and tasks and things I've done throughout my whole life. So I started out with the paranormal. Being Native American, you kind of experience a lot of, paranormal ghosty things throughout your whole life. So my brother ended up becoming a medicinal person that specializes in getting rid of evil and darkness. So I guess you can say like a Native American exorcist. So at a very young age, he was 13 years old, I was 9 years old, and I started learning stories from him at that age. And then I started actually going out with him when I was 14, 15, 16, all the way up to, I was 26 years old last year and everything. So now kind of going on solo right now, going on my own journey of spiritual learning, spiritual experiences, and experienced a lot of crazy ish in my life, living on the reservation and stuff. And, I make a YouTube channel and everything, telling stories. I'm going on paranormal investigations again now on that channel. So I kind of tell a little bit about like skinwalkers, demons, and other certain things that we've encountered in our life. So that's a little bit about me. And yeah, I come from the Navajo Nation too.
So I guess an awesome spot to start. You're already bringing up skinwalkers right in the beginning. I don't know if I should let that one simmer for a little bit before we get into that one, but we'll definitely have to make sure we bring that one back around. But I guess kind of diving into like some of your background growing up and everything. I know that you said you paranormal investigate, and I'm kind of curious what like the extent of that is. I know that, being on the reservation, of course, you're dealing with different things than probably a lot of other paranormal investigators are dealing with, going to just the typical like abandoned buildings, places like that. So at least coming from like your background, the type of stuff you deal with on the reservation, like what type of like paranormal stuff are you kind of dealing with on a regular basis?
So we normal ceremonies and everything when we were growing up, we would kind of interact with more so elemental spirits, seasonal spirits, healing spirits, a lot of the good, a lot of the healing side of things. It wasn't until like I always said, I started going out with my brother that people would have some of these dark entities that would show up at their homes, whether that be like Anasazi spirits, or whether it be shadow beings, dark demons, skinwalkers, these certain things. And we would go do ceremonies and we would go chase these beings away, whether that be through an exorcism, physically getting rid of these beings outside of their home and stuff. And we would go do offerings and so many other different things throughout the years and everything. And so it wasn't until like just one day, I was chilling and I was watching TV and I was like, why don't we make a YouTube channel doing this? Because I grew up watching Ghost Adventures. I grew up watching Ghost Hunters and everything. And we, from doing this from a little kid all the way up to where I am now, it was a lot of things were being missed as far as for potential communication and potential stories that they're missing because they're just trying to prove the existence that ghosts are real. But it's just like, we already know they're real. And like we're chilling, having conversations with these beings and stuff. So it's we bring a new element into it because in a sense, every single investigation is a ceremony to us. We go in there with the intent to help spirits. We go in there with the intent to learn. And, sometimes if there's a dark being, maybe they have something to tell, story to tell and everything like that, but also try to help spirits if there's innocence inside of there as well. So duking it out with the evil in the dark too at the same time, but also trying to get a story out of it too as well. So kind of complex. So, we take a paranormal investigating more so of a cultural point of view from our tribe.
So kind of digging into kind of like the belief system / background of everything too. I know like in some of the reservations, it's kind of split between like a couple different religions and like the actual like native religion, at least for like where you grew up. Did it seem like there were some splits? Did it seem like everybody kind of believed that there was something else going on? Was there like kind of a division going on? Or like how was that kind of set up?
So everybody kind of grew up knowing there's something out there. Like I'm pretty sure like everybody that I knew growing up as kids, we would always tell like, yeah, I got a ceremony done yesterday, and then all of us kids would kind of go around each other and be like, what did you see? And then like, I don't know, man, like we were doing a ceremony, and then we saw this dark shadow run across the room and everything. So like it's more so built into the culture. It's a lifestyle of understanding that there's a lot more to the world than just our physical selves that are just here on this earth. And growing up with that understanding of trying to be one with all of that, trying to be one with it, and trying to help it too as well, and do our part to help out the spiritual world too. And it kind of really depends on if you grew up if you grew up traditional, if you grew up like in the traditional ways of like the old ways of living in the traditional lifestyle of our tribe, or if you took more of a modern take on it, modern take on life, and you didn't really want to take on those traditional beliefs and stuff, but living on the res, you still experience, some crazy things. Like I don't know a Navajo in the Navajo Nation that hasn't experienced, say like skinwalkers and stuff like that. It's a very, very common thing that happens out there.
Well, I mean, it keeps coming up, so I feel like we'll probably get into this, and then we got to get into some other stuff afterwards, because I got a lot more stuff I want to dive into as far as the background and folklore. But since you've kind of brought it up a little bit, and I'm sure that the listeners are definitely wanting to hear about it, the whole skinwalk phenomenon, talking about how common it is on the reservation. So I guess like the first thing we should kind of set up is everybody kind of has this idea, and it's one of those things that's kind of been like almost like telephone. It's kind of been scattered between a bunch of different folklore. A bunch of people have different ideas about what a skinwalker is exactly. Once you kind of set the record straight on what it is, and then we can kind of get into what people experience with them.
Yeah, and that's something that honestly started out my very first paranormal video, was because of that telephone effect, like it's spreading from Arizona all the way like across the world, like skinwalkers became like a huge phenomenon that everybody was just like, if you see something weird, it's a skinwalker. Like, hey, no, that's not true and everything. So skinwalkers are a type of deity and being that is a shapeshifter. It's so to kind of put it in people's perspective, it's a shapeshifter, but it's a specific kind of shapeshifter. And there's different types of shapeshifters depending on what religion, faith, race, and belief that you have. There's different deities that are out there. So Skinwalker is derived from the Navajo name Yenagloshi, which is the and I say it wrong just because if you say like the actual traditional like name, if you say it right, then that's when you say, oh, you're not supposed to say it because of the come. And
so you purposely say it wrong because it's one of those things you're not supposed to say the name because it calls it in.
There's like a couple letters in there that I switch up and everything, but so if you say the name, in a sense they hear your prayer. It's just like if somebody calls your name and you could turn and look and you listen, and in the same sense it's like that. So skinwalkers, originally based from what I was told, was it used to be a good thing. It used to be a used for a ceremony where medicinal people used to go traverse and travel to 4 sacred mountains in our Navajo Nation. So to give you an idea of how far apart these mountains are, there's one in Flagstaff, 2 in Colorado, and there's one in Grants, New Mexico. So medicinal people had to traverse and go to these 4 sacred mountains within 4 days on foot. So the spiritual people taught them how to shapeshift into these sacred deities and these animals. It took a long time to learn how to do that, though. So along the way, there were some medicinal people that had a hard time learning how to do that. And they're like, whether that came up through jealousy, whether that came up through anger, a dark spirit heard their prayer, like, I can teach you a way that's a lot faster. Then you don't have to do all these steps and everything, spend years of your life trying to learn how to do this. So comes the Yanagloshi, the jump in the skin skinwalkers. So There's a lot of steps you got to go through. Very, very dark. One of the main ones is you have to sacrifice a loved one that's very close to you, and then you have to do some crazy, crazy stuff with their body, and then use that inside of your transformation ceremonies and stuff. And then you have to go and hunt and kill, whether that be a buck or a coyote, the very first ones. And that's when, after you do that, you do some crazy stuff with their body too, and then you harvest their skin. You don it on yourself, and you do this first ceremony. And you can learn how to shapeshift in a very quick way. Like I said, like the good original way didn't involve, sacrifices, nothing like that, nothing evil. It was made in a very holy way, in a protective way. So Yanagloshis that know how to do that, it's very, very bad. So typically, including in those ceremonies, you'll have skinwalkers. They come from the Navajo Nation. And typically they can go outside of the borders a little bit if they want to. They can kind of go into Utah a little bit. They can kind of go into Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona a little bit, branch out from there. But they typically don't like to do that because they, in a sense, the mountains and the area give them power. So if they leave that, their power starts to diminish. They're not as powerful, or they start running into problems of they may not be able to change it back into a human if they want to. They may be stuck in their animal form, or they have to find somewhere to change his skin before the sun comes up, because once the sun comes up, they're stuck as an animal forever. So they have to be relatively close to wherever they set their boundaries and stuff. And plus, if you go to like a location, say like you go to a city, I get questions a lot. If a skinwalker goes to a city, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the big tough skinwalker and everything, but you got a powerful demon that's in charge of the territory over there. And they say, what the hell are you doing in my spot? What the hell are you doing in my area? And then they're like, oh, I'll challenge you. And then the demon just goes and kills them real quick, because he's not as powerful as he was when he was in the Navajo Nation. So in a sense, yeah, that's a little bit of the origins and where skinwalkers and all that come from.
So, I mean, at least a lot of people, they talk about like skinwalkers that are completely out of like the Navajo Nation. And that's usually kind of where I was saying like a lot of the weird folklore kind of comes in. And, the whole like not deer thing, for example, just to kind of bring it up into conversation a little bit. Do you think that like that could be possibly some of the, like the skinwalkers that didn't make it back to be able to transform or something? You think that might be partially where some of that phenomenon is coming from?
Could be. Like I said, like each tribe and each faith and religion has a version of the skinwalker. They just have their own name to it. And I was speaking to some of our brothers and sisters over in the Mexico territory, and they were talking about how they have a deity called the Nahuales. And those beings are very, very similar, but they have their own name, and how they become that deity is very, very different. So that's one thing like I was just trying to like have people think about is there's more to it. You guys have to like it's just like misidentifying a person, like saying like they're Mexican American, but then you like say they're African American, but they're not. It's just like you got to be able to be specific. You got to be able to, out of respect for the person you're trying to speak with and everything, there's different variety, and it's very diverse when it comes to the very spiritual world. A lot of people still think it's just black and white. There's angels and demons, and that's it.
Yeah, it's definitely not the case at all. I mean, even within like species and stuff, I mean, everybody has different intentions, but hold on tight, everyone. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break. But if you don't mind taking a second to follow Inquiries of Our Reality on Instagram and Facebook, and Open Minds Media on YouTube and TikTok, I'd greatly appreciate it. And feel free to spark up a conversation. I love getting to know you guys. And now back to the show. Also, kind of just to differentiate it a little bit more. So a lot of the stuff for like the Wendigo, for example, it talks about how there's the human spirit, but then there's this other spirit that possesses them and also is like within the same body. When it comes to like skinwalkers, is it more so that they've made some type of contract where they have some power, but there's not something else in them? Or is it that there's their own soul and then there's like the soul of something else that's with them, kind of more like the Wendigo lore a little bit?
It's more of just the self. There's not really more so of a contract that's done with the devil, I guess you can say, to be able to obtain power. Wendigo spirits is more so, I guess it's an involuntary effect of actions and stuff that you've done in your life from things I've learned. I would love to go up to those tribes, where they have the Wendigo and everything, and I would love to learn their stories to be exact, but a rough estimate, from what I can put together is, it's more so of an involuntary action it's a reaction of your actions that you did, consequences and stuff that you've done in your life to be able to have that spirit come to you and possess you and take you over like that. Skinwalkers is like, nah, fuck that. I really need to learn how to do this, so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be able to become this being kind of thing.
Well, I mean, that kind of shows the whole, like, I talk about this all the time, that I think that a lot of these different cultures are all talking about the same things. They just have different names for them. So, I mean, like, there's possession, which would make sense for the whole like Wendigo aspect of things. And then there's also the whole concept about like the contracts with whatever these demonic forces is, or whatever name you want to use for these beings. So, I mean, it's one of those things that clearly like pops up in multiple cultures. And it's not that any of them are necessarily like, this is the exact one. It's just different names for the same phenomenon that's happening, which also kind of brings more validity into the phenomenon in the first place, that you're seeing this in multiple places. It's not just this one particular place that this is happening at.
That's one thing I love, and one thing I cherish so much about the channel that I've made is because it's reached so many cultures, it's reached so many different people around the world, and I get to hear like similar stories of beings and deities from across the seas, across the world, and then like I never would ever get to experience something like this, because like a lot of this stuff is more so word of mouth, oral history kind of thing. You don't really get to find books on certain things like this. And, hearing it from people who've actually experienced it themselves just makes it that much more potent of a story and a tale, and of a being and spiritual deity that they interacted with.
So, I mean, kind of talking about some of the stories, I'd like to get into, I mean, we can definitely get into some of the other weird stuff that people have experienced, but just for the time being, I definitely want to get into like the Skinwalker thing. So what is like the typical experience that people have with these things? And then what are some of like the experiences that have kind of stuck out to you, or if you've had some personal experiences with these things?
Oh yeah, I've had quite a bit for sure. It's one of those things that like when you grow up on the reservation, it's a very rural area. So like your nearest neighbor is a couple miles down the road, and it's like very dirt road kind of lifestyle. It's like everybody lives, like one person lives in a canyon, another person lives in like a forest area, then another person lives in like the desert area kind of thing. And they're very far away. And a lot of these homes and these families still don't have running water or electricity too. So it's very, very hard for them to, have some of these experiences and just having that feeling of just seclusion and just being separated from the world. And that's one thing I remember as a kid, like when we would experience some stuff like this, it's terrifying because like on the Navajo Nation, one thing that sucks is whenever you want to call the police, a lot of people in the city, they come in like 10, 15 minutes or something like that. In the reservation, they don't come for 3, 4, or 5 hours, because they're very understaffed and they have to cover like so many grounds, such a large area and everything. So, and a lot of times you just have to handle and take care of shit by yourself. And when you're a kid alone in this house, with your little cousins and everything, and you're with your grandma and your grandpa, they're old and stuff like that. You just got to endure and deal with it. And most of the cases that happen are, you're living in a one room home and stuff, and in the middle of the night your dogs start barking, and you're just like, you get woken up and everything, and you're just like, what's going on? And out of nowhere, like they just start whining and crying, and you're just like, what? Oh, like, and then you kind of feel like this dark energy kind of surround your home. And you wake up your grandma and your grandpa, or sometimes you don't have a grandma and grandpa, and you're just there by yourself with your cousins, or what have you. And out of nowhere, you just hear like footsteps on the roof of your home, like someone's walking up there, and you're just a little kid, and you're just like, I don't think that's Santa Claus, and you're just like thinking of all these different things and just the vulnerability and aloneness of this whole thing. So you go to make sure your door is closed, make sure all the windows are locked and everything. And, I remember I would be terrified, and I never left the spot where I was sitting. And I was just hoping and praying that whatever it was did not come busting through that door and did not come breaking in through the window and stuff. And because normally we would have like a blanket that would kind of cover the windows and stuff as a kind of a curtain kind of thing. And, you know, like I never had the courage as a kid to go up and look outside because I had an idea what was out there, and I was scared to see what was out there. So in a sense, that's more so like what you would experience growing up with my brother. You know, we would kind of deal with this situation a lot where people would get sick from these beings. They would witch you. They would, in a sense, shoot bone darts at you, shoot bones inside of your body. And we would have to do ceremonies to be able to extract those things, from the patient themselves, and in a sense, reverse a curse that they're put on you. Their specialities and weapons, like I mentioned, they have bone knives, bone darts, crushed up bones from human bones and everything, powder, and they mix it with poisons. And if they're able to get inside your home, if they're able to catch you off guard outside, they have the ability to paralyze you if they can. And when they paralyze you, they can go up to you and then they blow that dust inside of your face and your eyes, and you breathe it in. And if you don't get a ceremony done very soon, you know, you're going to die of that poison. So that's kind of one of those things that they go for, you know, fear. They go for killing. They go for these certain things to make themselves more powerful. So in a sense, that's kind of some of the stuff that you would be able to witness and see on the reservation when it comes to skinwalkers and stuff.
So, like, I guess what's the reason for these things wanting to come after people? Is it like a matter of when they've made these contracts, like they're trying to like collect souls? Are they just like normal people just going after people they've had issues with in the past? Like, what's like their reason for wanting to specifically come after people?
A little bit of both. I guess you can say they got a quota to meet, you know, gather fear energy, gather all that other stuff, and possibly gather souls if it comes down to that point. It really just depends on themselves. You know, there's a lot of jealousy on the reservation. You know, they always say, you know, don't go bragging about your life is good on the reservation, because somebody jealous on the reservation is going to come and try to witch you and stuff like that. So that's one of the things is it really depends on who you are and what you try to do. The reasons why they do it, you know, we've actually had like some conversations with skinwalkers that kind of put the skins down, and then they were telling us their origin story and everything. And it gets kind of sad, man. Like, I don't know. Do you watch anime at all?
Yeah, of course. The character progression, man, is crazy. Like,
yeah,
if you like stories, anime is where it's at.
yeah. So, like, you ever see like a villain that has a legit reason for turning evil? You know, like a lot of times these people come from broken homes. They come from, you know, families that have alcohol abuse, physical violence abuse, you know, drug abuse, or whether or that, or they grew up as orphans. And just because of the systematic stuff that happened to Native Americans, you know, all that stuff ended at my mother was the very last one to kind of deal with a lot of the boarding schools and residential schools and stuff. So like that harsh military style of trying to like beat the language out of us, beat the culture out of us, you know, they were dealing with those traumas. They're still alive to this day. And so how they dealt with that stuff when they went to the boarding schools and all these crazy things that happened, they resorted to drugs, they resorted to alcoholism, they resorted to violence, because there's no one to teach them how to deal with their problems and everything. So in a sense, that's where it kind of translated into the darker side of the realities of emotional trauma, physical trauma, and all these certain things. And these dark beings and entities would go up to these kids. Sometimes they would run away from home and they didn't want to deal with it. And a dark entity would just come up to them and say, hey, I could be your family. We can be your family. We can protect you. We can love you. We can be there for you, kind of thing. And, you know, we'll take care of you. And they said that that's all they ever wanted. And so they take it. You know, there's no one else that's going to be there for them. So until like somebody comes along and shows them a different way or different road in life and everything. And then also it's just like one of those things. It's just like people ask, like, why do they do it? It's just like, well, why do people still murder today? Why are there still, you know, all these other different things out there today? You know, it's a lot of different reasons why people can go bad. And that's why, like, I bring up animes, because like a lot of times, you know, like some of these villains that are on these shows, like have legit, like, I understand why you're mad. I understand why you're like the villain in this show and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Man, I mean, a lot of people, they think that they're just these creatures or these beings. Like, I'm glad that you've kind of broken it down a little bit, that people can understand that these are just normal people during the day, and it's just specifically at night that they're able to shapeshift, or can they shapeshift during the day if they're like of a certain level, or like is it specifically only like a nighttime thing?
Specifically only a nighttime thing, because in our stories and everything, the sun is a spiritual deity and a god too. So just because of it being able to see darkness and evil, that's why you can see some paranormal stuff happening like every day in your normal day, everyday life, because that, either they're powerful enough to be able to withstand the dark or the sun's power, the sun's rays, or they're just not evil. So in like one of the curses and stuff like that, the effects of being a skinwalker I mentioned earlier is like, if you're still in the animal form when the sun arises, once that sun god sees you, he curses you to be stuck in that form. So that's why they more so do it at night. I've never seen any of them do it during the day. So that's, I don't think any of them's got that powerful, at least not in my lifetime that I've seen, but I can't say 100% sure that there's no, it's not a possibility kind of thing.
And we got to hope that they were stronger when they first started off, and now they're just starting to get weaker. So maybe they were able to do it at one time, but they'll hopefully never be able to do it again. But so at least for these things being able to transform into something, where does that kind of come in as far as like, do they have to collect that specific animal skin or is it just that the first couple are part of the ritual? Like what makes it so they can transform into certain things, and like what's the extent of like what they can turn into?
When it comes to the physical side of things, because people always ask me this too, like, are they just physical or can they be spiritual too as well? It was just like, well, what happens when you die? You become a ghost. And sometimes when these people actually die, they haven't fulfilled their contract they had with this evil deity or whatever for this power, and they have to continue on being a skinwalker spiritually too. So this is where it gets a little bit complex, because physically, yes, you do have to have, when you're still alive, you have to have the physical skin on you. So that's more so of when it comes to the different skins, there's different, there's a ranking system, I guess you can say, because when it comes to the coyote, when it comes to the buck, they're more so easily turned to evil and darkness to be converted into that. But when you start getting into the wolf, when you start getting into the mountain lion, when you start getting into the bear and all these other more powerful sacred deities and beings, that just shows your rank as far as for how much you know the evil side to be able to convert good from good to evil kind of thing. So it's just like, that just kind of shows your power as far as for what you can do. Now, spiritually, on the other hand, I've never really talked about this in public, but yeah, they have the ability to transform into many different animals because they've had such a long time to be able to have those abilities and everything. It's easier to do that spiritually than it is physically. So it gets pretty complex when you start going into the spiritual realm of things.
So, I mean, kind of getting into the more complex, this is partly going to like the spiritual realm of things, but is there like an extent of like what they could turn into theoretically? Like, would it have to be animals that are like specifically in like the Navajo Nation, or like say if one came out of the area and they took out an animal that isn't necessarily native to that area, would they be able to turn into that too? And then even on the spiritual side too, like you said that it's a little bit more like malleable. So like the spiritual side, boundaries don't necessarily mean anything in from the physical realm. So like at that point, would they be able to turn into essentially any animal on Earth that they would want to be able to if they were strong enough?
Possibly, yeah. That's one of the things is when that goes more into the preparations of the skins and the ceremonies needed, because there's a certain song for each animal. And a lot of times in the Navajo culture, we didn't have, like, for example, zebras. So like we don't know like the traditional story of how those beings and deities go. And so if you're a spiritual deity and say like you're a skinwalker in the spiritual realm and you start going beyond that, then you're no longer really considered a skinwalker. You're considered a different type of being that's more powerful than a skinwalker. And then you go to a different classification and naming system after that. So it's kind of like I always said, like it's more so of a ranking system. So if you're able to, go into like different deities and beings and animals and stuff like that from across the world, it's possible. I haven't seen any spiritual elephants running around the res. So, maybe they're just like tired of the res. And when they get to that power, they're like, they have more important things to do than just run around and scare people at night. You know,
too
what
big
I mean?
and clunky.
Yeah. It gives away your cover. So,
even a spiritual elephant, try hiding that in a room, like.
I know, right?
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a flash. But if you don't like hearing the ads, then I have a solution for you. You can get ad-free and early access to this show and Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin on the Open Minds Media Patreon for just $1 a month. That's less than a bag of chips, and it's a great way to support the show and all the hard work behind it. And if you're interested in merch store discounts, live access to episodes, or premium video versions of episodes, then there are a few other tiers with additional benefits with 7-day free trials available. And we are back, so let's hop right in. And then this might get a little bit darker on this side of it, but so I had somebody on named Robbie Marks a long time ago, and he was kind of diving into like the whole Skinwalker phenomenon, kind of more at, like its roots, not necessarily sticking to like the word specifically. And he kind of dove into this whole idea about basically Nimrod being like the first Skinwalker or one of the first Skinwalkers, because he found this portion where it talks about how he like wore Adam's skin. And so that might be a totally different classification, but have you heard of anything, or is it possible for somebody who even comes in from the entryway of becoming a shapeshifter through a Skinwalker to be able to shapeshift into like another person if they took their skin and did the right ceremony to it? Like, is that something that's possible?
That would be beyond a Skinwalker. So that goes into a different classification of shapeshifter, and that's where it really kind of tells, like how I mentioned before, like if you see like a mountain lion skinwalker, like you respect their rank, like you got to deal with it accordingly. So if you have a deity that can go into physical human skin and and then not even having to, I guess you can say, harvest the skin and do the ceremonies and stuff like that, then that's when you get to like, oh shit, this guy's the real deal kind of thing, and if per se, like I've never seen anybody like go take somebody out and use their skin and turn into that person they took out and killed. That's more so beyond what Skinwalkers can actually do, honestly. If I were to put Skinwalkers on like a power scale of spiritual deities on the dark side of things, they're a 0.5 out of 10. Not even that, like a 0.25 out of 10. So like a deity that can go ahead and shapeshift into a human, I would have to say there may be a 2 or 3 starting out, and then the ones above that can be able to learn how to do that pretty easily too. So it just, when they start doing certain things that are kind of out of the normal Skinwalker realm, that's when they transcend into another type of deity, I guess you can say.
And I guess if you want to, at some point, we can definitely dive into if there is anything that goes past this, or if you have anything else like within like your background, anything that goes a little bit farther past that. But so you kind of mentioned like the ranking system as far as like, them turning into a mountain lion or a bear. At least from your experience, if you've kind of dealt with these things firsthand, have you noticed somewhat of like a hierarchy as far as like, say like the coyotes and the deer maybe are more prone to attack people than say like the mountain lions or like the bears? Like, have you noticed anything where like the ones that are higher up on the scale are maybe less aggressive, like they're not trying to prove themselves, or is it kind of like you're dealing with a threat no matter what you're dealing with?
Yeah, so exactly what you said. They're the higher ups only come out when they need to, and because then they have like the younglings kind of go run their errands for them. In a sense, they're the ones that kind of become the masters. They become the teachers of the newborns that kind of come in and stuff like that. So like they don't want to go risk losing all their years of teaching and knowledge and training by pure accident. They run into say like what warriors in our tribe like me and my brother and everything, and then they get taken out. They don't want to run that risk unless they absolutely need to, kind of thing.
So, I mean, it kind of makes sense, I guess, with the animals themselves that, the wolves and the deer, they're more of like the pack animals, or they're going to make sense to kind of run around in a herd. And then all these ones that are higher up ranks are more prone to be off by themselves, kind of off in the distance. So It seems like it's kind of fitting in a good way to kind of hide yourself in plain sight. that if you're going to have the
Yeah.
attack dogs, what not better than like a group of dogs, you know? Like,
Yeah. And so that's when it goes into like when you even if you get higher up into the ranks, you still have to answer to somebody who's more powerful than you. So you still have to do their bidding and all these other different things. Like that's when like it goes beyond, skinwalkers, is that the skinwalkers have to listen to beings that are more powerful than them. Is that if they don't listen, they die, they get killed off. So that's in a sense like it's a whole pyramid scheme of hierarchy and everything that they have to kind of listen to the one that's more powerful than them kind of thing.
so this one might be a little bit complex, but when you're dealing with the skinwalker, so you take this thing out and it's an animal form. And I guess kind of let me run through this and kind of explain it a little bit. So if you take these things out, do they stay in animal form where like if you offed one, like there wouldn't be anything to worry about? Or do they like turn back into human form? Like, or even on the other side, like if you hurt one of these things, then they take off. Is there going to be a physical characteristic of them being hurt on their like human self? Like where does like the transition come in with when you're dealing with these things?
So that's something that the ones that actually stood and fought, most of the times, if you run into a skinwalker, you show no fear. You actually stand your ground. From all the years of experience that we've had, like about 99% of them actually just get scared and run away. Or like you run after them and then they're at the hill next over. You go back and then they come back to where they just were, kind of thing. They stay at a distance, kind of thing. And then unless like you're very scared and you're kind of worried about them, that's when they'll kind of come out and everything. But the few times that like we've actually had to go toe to toe with these things, yeah, they you take them out in their animal form. They stay as an animal form and stuff. And when most times the physical side of beings, that was more so on the spiritual side of things, is the physical ones, because they're still alive, they don't run the risk. It's more so the spiritual skinwalkers that are the ones that go toe to toe. So you take out a spiritual skinwalker and stuff, sometimes it's pretty interesting. Like we have the blessed weapons and blessed blades and stuff. You take out a spiritual being and their blood becomes physical because the blade transcended into the spiritual world and the blood ended up dropping on the ground. And then you don't really see their body or anything that's there unless you're spiritually gifted and you can see them and stuff. And then the spirits go ahead and take care of what happens afterwards. So, but honestly, like I've never taken out or from what I remember, taken out or injured a physical skinwalker, that unless they got away. But then even then, like you don't even know who it could be, or I still have some arrows stuck in some things running around, and I never got back, so I never found them. So could very well possibly transfer over to the physical world too.
Well, I'd love to get into some of your experiences going toe-to-toe with these things, and maybe something to kind of back it up towards the end, just out of curiosity, because I've heard some different stories from different groups of people with this one. I don't know if it's just one of those folklore type things, but have you ever heard anything about, like, also on your reservation, about somebody possibly, like, shooting one of these things or injuring one of them, and then the following day or a couple days later, somebody noticing that same cut or something on somebody walking around town?
So... yeah, not really. You kind of have a feeling of when somebody's a skinwalker and stuff. They have like physical traits. They have sunken eyes, very pale skin. They kind of look like they're dying, even though they're like 30 years old or whatever. They have like something that's weird and off about them. They have like weird. Sometimes they wear. I always notice they wear weird jewelry. Like it's always like a bone earring or. Like, they wear clothes that like, it was pretty interesting. Like we were at a place, is like it's called a flea market over in the reservations where like people kind of come around. It's like a big old huge yard sale and stuff. And we were there and we noticed that there was somebody that was of evil intent there. And he noticed us too. And what he did was he had a jacket and he looked at us and he smiled and then he flashed his jacket and there was a skin inside of it. And and then he went like that and he looked at us and smiled, closed it, and he just walked off. And because we were in like a physical, like public place like that, we couldn't handle or deal with it. So it's considered like neutral territory, I guess you can say, when you're in public places. So they have a right to walk around and do stuff and everything. But when it comes to nighttime and you're showing up at my house, yeah, all bets are off, man. So yeah, it was pretty interesting to see that physically. And I was like, oh, I look at my brother. I was like, do we get him? And he's just like, no.
That's like flashing a piece at somebody, you know? That's like the equivalent of like showing your gun on your waist or something to somebody.
Exactly, dude. So it was pretty tense for sure. And, you know, it's sometimes, you know, like we would never see him again though. And that would be something that, you know, sometimes these evil people, these evil beings that do this stuff, they go missing. Then you see them one day, they never come back. And whether you know, they got taken out by somebody else or, you know, because learning how to protect yourself and go against these beings, there's other people out there on the reservation that know how to bless their weapons. They know how to bless like their guns and their bullets and stuff like that too, to protect themselves. So sometimes they get lucky shots off and, you know, they can get rid of skinwalkers too and everything. I've heard stories like that. And, you know, like people just don't come back, you know, like they just leave at night and then, you know, their family's wondering like, where did so-and-so go? I haven't seen him in a while. They go to his house and his house is empty and they never see him again kind of thing.
I mean, I almost wonder too if, like, for an example with that one that you experienced, if he just kind of flashed it to you as like a ha, you almost got me, and then he disappeared because he knew that your guys are going to eventually come looking for him. So I almost kind of wonder if they'll do some stuff like that, and then they'll just be like ho, and then just take off before you're able to look for him again.
Yeah, exactly, dude. And it's like it's just spiritual warfare, man. And you know that's something that we've always been dealing with. You know, there's like evil, like we have medicinal people in our tribe, but we also have the equivalent on the opposite spectrum, which is evil witchy people that typically aren't skinwalkers too. You know, they can like witch people, you know, we always have this funny thing, like, cause I used to play basketball and everything. And sometimes those evil people would show up to video or basketball games and stuff. And they would have a niece or a cousin or a brother or sister that would be playing in the game and they would be witching other players and stuff. From the other team. And so like I remember this one time we were at a basketball game and just so happens one of my assistant coaches was a medicine man and he stopped the game. He pointed somebody out in the crowd and he told, you know, the security to get him out and everything. And it was one of those evil people that were there. And so they kicked him out of the gym and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very real thing, like whether people believe it or not. You know, sometimes, you know, like you get injuries that just are really bad that happen out of nowhere. And, you know, you go see a medicine man, the medicine man finds out, you know, you're a witch during your game, you know, like in a sense, they put bad luck on you. And so something like that happens and, you know, it gets pretty crazy.
Do they have to like collect something from you? Almost kind of like how like Sanctuaria or like voodoo works? Because you were talking about like crushing up bones and all that stuff earlier. And it seems very like reminiscent of, you know, some of like the New Orleans style witchcraft.
Yeah. The ones that are more powerful don't have to. They can kind of just shoot energy if they really need to, shoot curses and stuff. But it is a lot easier, say, if like you have a strand of hair, you have a personal object and everything inside of your home and stuff they take, then they can be able to have that connection and tie with you too, to make it that much more potent, that much more powerful and everything. So that's why I say, like, I have long hair and stuff. So like I grew up, you know, having that teaching of like, whenever you brush out your hair, you have hair on your brush, you know, you have hair laying around and stuff, always pick it up because you never know if evil wants to come and take some of your hair and everything and try to witch you and stuff. So yeah.
So, yeah, dude, I want to dig into some of your experiences, kind of going toe to toe with some of these things.
Yeah. So I'll talk about this one example, and it was this was one of the very first times I would have to say I went toe to toe with them, but it wasn't really, I can't really go into details about the combat situation, but I can talk about this story because the elders told me I can't really go into the spiritual combat side of stuff, but they told me that I could tell this story because it was very tense. Like I was very young. I was trained up and I was ready to go, but we actually had some relatives that needed a ceremony done. And this is how real it got for me and my family, was because they called us, and they were kind of extended family that live in a different part of the reservation. And they told us that there was a shack that had some very, very dark, evil things inside of it. And they tried getting other medicine men to go and kind of get rid of that stuff, put it away and everything. And I guess it belonged to their grandfather that passed away. And he had some of his items and stuff inside of there. And so, but no other medicine man would go near it because it was too powerful. It was too evil. So that's when they called us to go out there and go do that. So it was me, my brother, and my uncle that went out there. And so we waited for it to get dark, just to kind of, we do a lot of our ceremonies at dark because we also call upon the stars and the night spirits and everything to come help us out too. So that's that's why we do a lot of things at night too. But at the shack here, it was very, very interesting. We got done on our armor, we had all our weapons and stuff like that, and we go to the shack, and the only thing that was illuminating it was 2 trucks that were there. The vehicles, and I would have to say it was about like a quarter mile away from the home and stuff. And so we were down there, and it's like how I mentioned before, there's no neighbors, no nothing nearby or anything like that. And I could just remember walking up to that shack and just feeling darkness, man. Like it was heavy. Like we were dealing with certain stuff like that up until that point that I've experienced. And this one was definitely more so on the top tier at the time of things I've experienced. And my brother said, before we even go in, he tells me, you wait out here and you watch our 6, you watch our back in case something wants to come out and come from out there and go try to ambush us, I guess you can say. So I was standing there, I had my weapon drawn, and I could just feel all that stuff that's right there. And because the truck headlights were on me, you could only see like about 4 or 5 feet in front of you. So say like if a skinwalker actually came running at you, you would have like a split second, 2 seconds to react, to be able to just be like, get that slash in if you needed to. And so, but it was tense, and I was just worried about that. I had my eyes moving like this, and behind me, my brother and my uncle go inside of the shack. And when they opened that door, it was like a freezer door was open inside of a meat locker of dark energy that just kind of came out like that. And I remember I heard them, and I was just like, what's in there? Because I was curious too. I wanted to see, but I didn't want to take my eyes off of, what was happening in front of me. So I was like, tell me what's happening, what's going on in there. And so they said, there's 3 chests inside of here. And I was like, 3 chests. And then I kind of heard them talking to themselves. And so it was one of those old school, like you see like on Titanic, those old school chests made out of like leather and everything, really old school. And so they opened up the first one, and it was just kind of some clothes and stuff inside of there. And so they're like, okay, well, this isn't, I don't think there's really much in here and everything. And so they get to the second chest, and all 3 of them were stacked on top of each other. So they moved that chest right there. And this one right here, before they even opened it, I was feeling something was really off to myself. And I could kind of faintly hear and see like certain shadows kind of walking way off in the distance, like things kind of coming closer. And my senses, I guess you can say my spidey senses were starting to go off. And I was just like, oh shit. I say Ade, and then Ade in our language means they're coming. And so, and then my brother said, oh, he said yes. And he agreed with me. So they tried to hurry. They opened up the second chest. And when they opened that up, it was, you hear a woman scream. And there was no women within our party, and even in the household too. It was just my grandpa, and then his 2 sons that he had there, and then it was my grandfather's grandfather that was his shack that was there. So there was no women at all near us, and I turned, like I got shivers, like I was like freaking out. I gripped my sword even more, and I turned and looked. I got shivers, and then I was just like, "You guys good?" And they're like, "Yeah, they were okay." And I was just like, I was just thinking in my head, I was just like, that's even with the stuff I've experienced, hearing that scream, I was like, what the fuck, like this is I was like, this is, because sometimes we go to ceremonies and stuff, we do that, and I'm like, okay, it's just normal stuff, and there could be just nothing. This one is like, this is legit, we're in it for the real deal. And so inside of that chest, there's a picture of a woman with 4 stones and a bone inside of there. And so we looked at it. They picked up the picture and everything of the woman, and we didn't know or recognize who it was. So my uncle and my brother put those stones in that picture inside of a leather pouch and everything. They had that for later for a different ceremony. And so they moved that second chest, and inside of the third chest, that's when things got crazy. They lifted up the chest and they opened it, and inside was the regalia of the Skinwalker that my great grandfather had on that family side and everything. They had the buckskin inside of there. They had the bone knives, the bone ash, and even the antlers that he wore to be able to shapeshift and stuff. And so my brother came out, and he was like, "Brother, come here." I walked over to the door, and he showed me the antler. And on the stem of the antler, there was blood drops on the antler itself. And he's like, "You know what that means? You know what these represent?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Each blood drop represents a person this person has killed. So these are his kills that he's had. So that's how he represents it on his antlers that he had." So I'm like, dang, man, that's crazy. So they ended up gathering up the skin and all the regalia and stuff. And we ended up making our way back to the house. And we asked one of my grandfathers and my uncles to start a fire over there, get everything ready for the ceremony. And so we, in a sense, we did a ceremony to be able to release the spirit of the buck that's inside of there and have it go after the people that took its spirit and converted it to evil. In a sense, letting it have its revenge kind of thing. And so when we did that, we were doing the ceremony. My brother said, "When I'm doing the ceremony, I can't stop. So you guys have to look after me. You guys have to make sure nothing comes to try to stop me, because these evil things that are out here know what kind of ceremony I'm going to do, and they're going to try everything they can to stop it so that spirit doesn't get released." So I was like, "All right, here we go." So they have the fire going. He starts singing his songs and everything. He starts doing the motion with the buckskin and stuff. And we didn't have it. It was like right outside the house, and there was no like porch lights they didn't have electricity or anything. So all we had was the light of the fire and stuff. I think they might have had one solar porch light, but that was like kind of off in the distance. And so we just had how when you're out at night, there's like a ring of light that kind of comes around from its source. Mm-hmm. So around midway through his song, I saw somebody standing at the edge of the light. And they started walking the edge of the light like they knew where the edge of the light was too. And then sure enough, a second one comes, and they kind of just start walking right there. And so my uncle starts doing his war whoops. I do my war whoops too at them and everything, kind of like, dogging them out. Like, "Let's go. Come on. You're here. You're like 20 feet in front of me. Let's go," kind of thing. And so, but they kind of just stood there, and they were looking at us, and they were walking back and forth and stuff. And so they were like almost baiting us. They're like, "Come on, come out here, come face us out here." And so if we did that, there's probably someone else behind that would have went and jumped my brother if we left him. So they were trying to look for an opening for them to get inside. And so, we didn't let that happen. And so sure enough, when my brother was getting close to the end of the ceremony, you see them turn tail and they run off into the darkness. And so I would say about 2 miles north of the house, I would say there's a huge like rock canyon cliff that's over there. And they ran toward that direction. And when my brother finished up the ceremony, there was no wind, no nothing. But right when he finished the song, you felt the spirit of the buck leave, and a huge whirlwind and gust of wind came. It's all like the fire like blew over and stuff like that, and it went toward that direction. And not too long after, you hear one of them scream off in the canyons and everything. Like you hear their screams echo off the canyon, and it comes back toward us and everything. So that was one of the,
I'm surprised that one at least didn't try to come in after you guys, because if you knew it was already at the end of the line, I mean, you might as well go all out, right? You guys lucked out. He just decided to turn tail and run.
That's like they just knew like whether they go in or not, someone's gonna get messed up. So that's why they tried running, trying to be quick and everything, but they couldn't outrun that thing. So yeah, it gets pretty like wild and stuff like that. But that was tense, like I was really, before I was even 18 years old, dealing with that stuff. And then the next day I got to go to school and act like none of that happened.
Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back with that deep conversation you crave. But just a quick reminder, if you'd like to snag some gear for this show, Bizarre Encounters, or your favorite creature or topic, hop on over to the Open Minds Media merch store for a wide range of designs with new drops regularly. Welcome back to the show, and let's dive right in. So, I mean, like, at least as far as these things go, a lot of the stories that you hear from people are them getting attacked by these things. But it seems like if you come at them head on, they run. Like, is that just a matter of, at least for you, for example, you have these like blessed weapons and everything you can use against them and they know that? Or if just some random person, for example, that was passing through stayed near a reservation and they had to run in with these things, would they have luck trying to face this thing head on? Or like what would like a normal person want to do in like one of these scenarios?
Stand your ground. Don't show fear. You know, that's one of the things. Like, you don't have to be a part of the tribe to have spiritual power. You know, spiritual strength and physical strength too. You can have that too. But mental fortitude, you know, it's easy to prey on the weak. You know, like I said, like they've sacrificed so much to be able to get to where they are, and they do not want to risk, you know, even a hint of them losing their abilities, their greed, everything that they've built up, you know, up until that point. So, you know, that they have plenty of other people that are scared. You know, they have plenty of other people that they can pick on. You know, they can just lay in wait and stuff like that. And so, and plus other people that come from, you know, outside of the reservation could have guardian spirits that are with them too. So, you know, like they see somebody come about, you know, it's not native, but then they see like, you know, some big old angels with them with like heaven's goldenly armor and swords. They're like, hell no, I ain't messing with you, you know, so yeah, it's just, you know, fear is their biggest weapon. Fear is their biggest thing. And once they have that, you know, you're on their playing field when you do that. But, you know, you show no fear and everything, you know, most times they run away. And, you know, like I said, they don't want to risk losing everything they've sacrificed to get to where they are now.
So this might be a pretty good lead in for the next thing I kind of want to bring up with you. So the whole idea of Skinwalker Ranch, I'm sure this is probably going to open up like a whole can of worms, but it seems like whatever they're dealing with there isn't what people are describing as like actual skinwalkers. Like it seems to be something completely different because I mean, even like within that phenomenon, a lot of the people that go near Skinwalker Ranch, they claim that these things will just run at them like head on with no fear, nothing. So like, at least from somebody that's more familiar with the area, you've dealt with these things firsthand. Like, do you think that they're dealing with skinwalkers at Skinwalker Ranch? Like, what's kind of like your thoughts on all that?
In the past, yeah, skinwalkers used to, I would say, go over there because the way active skinwalking was adopted partially with the neighboring tribes. So say like the Ute, the Apaches, you know, they all have the Hopis, they have versions of them too. So Skinwalker Ranch, what people have to understand is the land itself. And people always kind of think about what written history is and stuff. You have to think about what the land was before, you know, all these new age stuff, ranches, and before that place was even built. Skinwalker Ranch and the land itself is a very, very sacred area. It's a very powerful area that emits a lot of natural energies. Same thing with our sacred mountains that we have too. Those are, in a sense, power places, power beacons that naturally give off a lot of energy. So that's why you get a lot of spiritual phenomenon that happens there. More so recently, there's not going to be a lot of skinwalkers because one, there's not that many skinwalkers out there. There's definitely a lot fewer than what there was back in the day. But kids rather play Fortnite than be skinwalkers these days, which is good. You know, they actually got Wi-Fi sometimes on the res. So, but that's one of the things is because it's such a spiritually active place. You know, you'll have all sorts of different type of beings and deities that go up there to try to use some of that energy. And that's why you get a lot of extraterrestrial beings too. So like I said, this is going to open up a big can of worms is because, you know, we have stories of extraterrestrial beings coming down from the Star Nation, the Star World, Star people coming down and using herbs and medicines and stuff like that from our earth and taking it back to wherever they are too, to be able to harvest some of the energy we have. They go into the mountains, they go into the earth to be able to harvest that energy too. So you'll have like all sorts of spiritual deities and beings showing up to those locations, and not so much skinwalkers anymore. Because it's very, very far from the reservation itself. So like I said, they have to have like places to change and become a human again. And then they have to end up hitchhiking and walking back all the way to the reservation when the sun comes up and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to do that. And two, it's very, very monitored. It's very, very cameras everywhere, sensors everywhere. You know, they don't want to run the risk of getting caught. You know, like I see all these people like trying to find skinwalkers and stuff, like come from outside of the res, and they're like, "Are there any skinwalkers here?" And it's just like, dude, these things aren't stupid. Like
you're walking around town saying this, like half of them are hearing you right now.
No, they're just walking. They're watching you from the canyons, just laughing at you. Like, the fuck, you think we're just gonna go walk up to you and get caught on camera? Fuck no. So yeah, like I'm pretty sure like back in the day, skinwalkers used to go over there to get power and energy and stuff. But yeah, not so much today's day and age. So that's where you run into more of the beings that will, you know, go chasing after you and stuff, that are more powerful and stuff like that, because they went to the mountain, got rebooted with energy, and they're ready to brawl out, kind of thing.
So, I mean, just, I guess also because you brought up some of these other beings, one of them being like extraterrestrials. What are some of the other beings that you deal with that are strictly something that you guys kind of talk about within like the Navajo Nation? Because when most people think of that, they just specifically think of like skinwalkers, but I'm sure that you guys have a lot of different stuff that you deal with that probably doesn't get too much word outside of like the reservation. So like what might some of these beings be?
They're, when you start getting into other beings and stuff, they're kind of go into the classifications of a certain type of deity, but just a native version of that. So we have death spirits that are there. We have, I guess you can say, sometimes old monsters of old stories sometimes get resurrected. Like, I'll give an example. What's really crazy and interesting that I always used to love these stories as a kid is my grandparents told me stories of when this world was created. Their spirit people had to go and chase. This land was full of monsters, and the spiritual beings and deities had to go out and hunt and fight these monsters, kill them off and chase them off, or either that or convert them into good beings and stuff like that. And you know, that happened for like a long time. Those wars were like a really, really thousands and hundreds, like even like millions of years long. And what was really interesting is, you know, they were telling these stories before dinosaurs were even like discovered. So, you know, people talk about like, oh, you know, a meteor wiped out all of the dinosaurs and stuff like that. Like, for me, you know, like spiritual deities and all that stuff are the ones that took out the monsters and everything. So like, we have stories of the Thunderbird. We have stories of giants. You know, we have stories of a being that's like 50 miles south of me in the mountains of Pace, and it was called the Mini Horn Monster. And have you ever seen the movie The Ritual?
Yes, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so you remember that being that had like antlers and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was like a giant like forest spirit, because that thing was like 15 feet tall.
Mm-hmm. That was one thing that was very interesting. I saw that movie and I was just like, that reminds me of how the stories of the Mini Horn Monster was, because it would, in a sense, it was a forest being and deity like that had antlers, and in its antlers it had eyes, and in those eyes it used to set off a vibration, and it would honestly sing a song to be able to hypnotize its prey, and it would hypnotize them, and it would come willingly over to its lair, and it would consume and eat them. And it was doing that to humans. It was doing that to animals. And so they had to send out warriors to go fight and kill that beast. And so unfortunately, it had children. And so, but because that those beasts and those deities had horns, the warriors in the stories, like the goat and the sheep, were some of those deities of its children. So they didn't want to kill off all of them. So they took off their power, and they twisted their horns back into their own heads. So if they ever wanted to use their own power, it would just get sent upon themselves. It wouldn't be able to be used for anybody else like that. So that's why, like, you would see the goats with the curved horns that go into their own heads like that. And so it's always really cool to hear stories like that, like of how some of these animals that we have today are the children of those monsters, but they were converted into, you know, good neutral animals and deities and beings and stuff.
It almost kind of reminds me of, I guess, kind of like some of like almost like the Nephilim stories, that there was like these beings that were around and they corrupted other beings, and in turn from there, like you had to kind of deal with these deformed type creatures. And I mean, even like the one you're just talking about, I mean, that could have been like a remnant of something else already. Like, I don't even know if that one is necessarily like the origin of this thing, but again, kind of getting into that broader scale of everything. Everything talks about, there was a time where all these things just ran rampant. And then there was a time where you had to deal with like the offspring of these things and hunting these things down. And all of them were like these corruption of nature between like a mixture of this and a mixture of that. Like, again, like that folklore is just universal. It seems like around the world when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this one story too of my brother told me this one time. There was a being in deity that was of creation. He was a creation spirit, not the creator, but he was a spirit that worked for the creator that would actually help him create beings and deities for this world. And he told me stories of the scorpion. And he said he was the creator of the scorpion itself. And he said, originally, when I created the scorpion, it was supposed to be a deity you would sing a song to, and it would burrow underground and it would get herbs and medicines from inside of the earth for you. And it would bring those out that you normally can't get. And so, you know, then one day Scorpion ended up coming back home to his creator, and out of nowhere, you know, the creator felt the sting on his leg. He's like, "What is that?" And then he's like, "Why did you sting me? What is this? Is there something on your pincer? Is there something at the end of your tail?" And then he looks at it, and there was like a needle, and then there was poison inside of it. And he said, "I've been corrupted by evil. Evil came and corrupted your creation. I was used for good, but then they put poison inside of me, and now, you know, I'm going to be stuck with this forever now." And so, you know, there's certain things like that are like really, really cool that go like beyond this world. You know, we have creation stories of like, and that's what's really interesting. You go into Native American folklore and folktales when you think about like creation stories. A lot of cultures have their creation stories that we all came from different worlds, and how we came onto this world was very different. You know, you think of the Lakota people, they come from the Star Nation. Navajos, we came from the earth itself. We came from the corn stalk and everything. That's how we emerged from this world too. And you go to different tribes, there's other stories like that too. And so, and then there's stories of those other worlds and stuff like that, and the spiritual deities of those worlds. And some of them have made their way over to our world and stuff like that. It gets deep, man. It's awesome.
Dude, I was going to say, I want to dive into some of this like background and folklore and everything. And I guess even for the sake of, you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier, at least for like Navajo, where do like the star people kind of play in? Like, are they beneficial? Are they something you kind of stay away from? Like what's kind of like the Navajo perspective on the people that come from the sky?
So the people that come from the sky and the Star Nation, they are in a sense very, very powerful deities. And they're pretty much the ones that you just leave be. You know, what's very interesting is my great-grandmother, my grandmother told me the story of her mother. When she was very young, she was living with her father at the time at the home. And this was a time when, you know, up until like a couple of years ago, they barely got power. So they came from a time when they had no radio, no TV, no nothing, no Western influence whatsoever. So she was a little girl, and they were inside of their traditional home, and there's a window. And one night she sees what she describes in Navajo as a glowing plate, like a dish plate, that came from the sky, and it went into one of the canyons. And she asked her dad in Navajo, she's like, "What is that?" And then he looked, and he was a medicine man too. And he said, "That's one of the Star Nation people. You let them be, you let them do their thing. You know, like we are not allowed to interact with them because they are of a higher consciousness and higher duties, I guess you can say, than what humans can kind of comprehend." And so he said, "You just kind of always let them be, let them do their own thing. If they ever come to you, you know, then you do what they ask," kind of stuff. So it comes from the utmost respect. And my grandmother, or my great grandmother, when she was little, she got curious, and she walked into the canyon that next morning. And so she walked in there, and she saw a burnt circle around in the ground. And so, but what was really interesting is she saw flowers growing out of the ashes. It was herbs, it was medicines and everything that don't normally grow in that area. And so what he told her was they come down either to gather energy or they come down to gather herbs and medicines, but they always leave something in return, you know. And so that's where kind of that teaching comes from. Like, if you ever take anything, always give something in return, whether that be harvesting crops, whether that be harvesting medicine, or, you know, everyday life. You know, like you go visit somebody, they give you some teachings, you know, give them some change, you know, like, or give them some food, you know, something like that. There's always that law of exchange kind of thing. And even when it comes down to paranormal investigating too, you go investigate some of these places, they tell you their stories, they interact with you, you know, they interact with your equipment and everything. You always give them an offering. You always say thank you, you know, even if it's a dark deity and being an entity, you know, sometimes, you know, you give them evil's necessary on this world. So, you know, you got to give them some of that offering for their teachings and stories that they give you.
Hey man, you got to be diplomatic no matter what way you look at it. You know, like two world powers talk, no matter how evil one side may be, you know, they're not going to sit there and fist fight. You got to, it's almost like how the mobsters, you know, deal with it in the movies. Like, there's no fighting amongst the high ranks. They'll sit and they'll have that respectful conversation, but
yeah, for sure, man.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. At least for for aliens, the sky people, whatever you want to happen to call them, you know, you're talking a little bit earlier about how a lot of this phenomenon isn't necessarily black or white. And this is like a perfect example of that, you know, most of the stories that you hear about extraterrestrials, I mean, it's extremely double-sided, where it's like some are good, some are bad, but at least a lot of like the rings you hear about, like you had brought up, usually hear about this like radiation burn where nothing will ever grow again. Like there's the Devil's Stomping Ground, for example, is one of these examples that a lot of people believe it was like it was a landing spot, but absolutely nothing will grow there. So, I mean, maybe it's like a differentiation, like within the culture, that maybe, you know, whatever happens to be visiting this area has more respect for the people that are living in that area. So they do purposely leave these gifts because they have, you know, generations and generations and generations of going back. Or it's on the other side that it's like, you know, different groups, you know, like this one's good, this one's bad. They may all be the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean they all have the same intentions.
Exactly. You know, like we're just talking about human stuff. You know, we got good, we got bad. And so I'm pretty sure out there they got good and bad too, you know. So, you know, whether they come down with good intentions or not, we're just, you know, luck of the draw, honestly, roll of the dice if you get a good one or not. So that's why, like, our teachers were always just let them be, you know. They're like, if they wanted to, they'll fuck you up if they wanted to.
Is there any like origin story or anything like that you'd heard about these guys, or they just kind of stay extremely mysterious, even like within folklore?
Even in folklore, like for even some of the stories that we do have, I can't really say that too much to the public, but it's more so of just one faction that we know of, and there's a whole cosmos out there, you know. And then even in like our stories and everything is where it gets a little controversial that a lot of people don't really agree with. Is like, I tell people, is like, I was asking, what if there's other gods and creators out there? Like, you know how people say we have a god and cosmic deity, how there's just one? Like, I always make people ask that question. Is like, maybe somewhere out there in the Milky Way somewhere, there's other creators out there. Maybe out there too, there's some dark ones, dark creators out there too. So, you know, then you go into their worlds, their stories, and all these other different things that are out there too. And so for me, when it comes down to extraterrestrials, I don't see them as ETs, like aliens or something like that. For me, I see extraterrestrial beings as spiritual deities. And because of the human mindset of how we see and think about ghosts, we think that they're some mythical, you know, all these other different things, when all reality, they're just a being in another dimension that our human bodies and minds cannot see or experience. Because, you know, you think of, somebody brought this up in my last live stream, how, you know, humans can only see a certain spectrum of light. Same with all other animals, same with all of these other different things. So imagine if we could see into the spectrum of those different dimensions, if we could see those other beings in those other places like that. And these spiritual deities are just in another dimension parallel to ours. and they're able to traverse the stars. They're able to do all these different things, and that's where I'm just like thinking like science ain't there yet. Like our technology that we have isn't there to be able to see those things. Just because they don't have a machine or anything to calculate or see those things doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You just haven't discovered it yet, kind of thing.
See, I definitely think that your brain picks up the fact that there's a void, because I've talked to enough people where there's been these weird experiences where somebody will see a shadow person, the person next to them will see like a full light apparition, and I wonder if it's a matter of like your brain knows that something's there, even if it's like a color maybe you can't see or something, so your brain just ends up filling in the gap, and depending on how your brain works, maybe it'll be a black figure, maybe it'll be a white figure, maybe it'll be this, but I think it's a matter of like, it's that absent point where like your brain tries to fill in the gap because it knows something is there, and maybe it just can't decipher the color, so it just basically will just fill in that color with a solid shape that you're aware of. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the shadow people phenomenon comes in, is that it's not that people are seeing a bunch of the same thing, but rather they're seeing a bunch of different things. They're just something that's existing in a light spectrum that we can't see, so your brain just fills in that gap, and now we're calling all these things shadow people, but I think there's a lot of differentiation within that.
Yeah, and that it all comes down to you only know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. I
was saying, even within that, I mean, you don't even really know for sure, because there might even be some more things that end up popping out at some point. So,
so like what you've experienced, that's where a lot of people would say like they feel things, they experience things, but they can't explain it. They don't understand it, and like how you said, your brain fills in the missing gaps of that to be able to come out to this painted picture that you see here, but somebody may interpret it some way else and stuff like that, because our brains are very, as advanced as they are, they're still not open to every possibility that's out there in the world. And so just kind of growing up a native culture like that, we had a fundamental understanding of all that stuff too. And so we live with that, knowing that we do our best with what we can. And we know that there's other beings that are out there that are more advanced, more smarter, more capable of everything that we can do, that humans can do. But humans are special too, but there's beings out there that can do way more. And we understood that. We learned that. And so we just do our best to try to be one with the spiritual world, physical world, and everything that's around us pretty much.
And I mean, talking about the spiritual world too, I'm kind of glad you brought this one back up full circle. So you were talking a little bit earlier about like origin stories, about how, some kind of talked about coming from the sky people, some talked about coming from the ground. You'd mentioned that with Navajo, that you had mentioned coming from the ground, specifically coming from like the corn stalks. Was there like a particular like entity or being or anything that supposedly kind of like ushered that? Because I'm kind of curious if you kind of mentioned the whole aspect of like the multiple gods thing, which is something that I've definitely wondered myself, because, from one perspective, whatever created you is going to be the god to whatever you are. And even if it's just single to one planet, like whatever it is, but, within like Native American folklore and culture, there's such a wide differentiation of origin stories. So either one, it's one of those things that everybody's off, which I highly doubt, or on the other aspect, maybe there was different origins for different groups of people from different beings that all kind of came in, and then once different cultures started all kind of blending, that's kind of where we've fallen into like our current perspective on things. But even within like the Americas, there could have been these little drip drop, whatever you want to call them, whether they're entities, beings, extraterrestrials, something that exists on a higher vibration or dimension from us. There's something that seeded life within that area.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, honestly, I'm kind of on the quest for, is try to learn where everybody came from, because like it may sound like we're the aliens that just kind of showed up on this planet. It sounds like that, but when it comes into the creation stories and everything, there was a couple deities and beings that came and ushered and brought us in here. But this is where it kind of gets a little bit deep. Is there was a creation in a time when there were certain transition periods when spirits became humans, or spirits became semi-humans, and then semi-humans became full humans, kind of thing. And so in our creation stories, we have first man and first woman. We kind of like how Adam and Eve kind of thing, but we have a version of that too for us. But they were half spirit, half man too, and half woman, half spirit kind of thing. And so they were the ones, and because they came together and birthed the first human, because they had the spirit halves and genetics and everything, their two human halves birthed a whole human kind of thing. And so there was a time, like we have creation stories of how we came from different worlds. The very first world we had was the dark world, where there was no sun. There was no, it was just a land of spirits and everything. All these lands they were just spirits at some point. And so it was just a land of darkness. And inside of these lands, something happened at all of these worlds where something bad happened, and we had to transition over to a new world, whether that be a world of darkness, and then we needed light. So we got transferred over to a world that had light, but then ended up that world got taken over by the world of floods and the world of water. So humans and spirits didn't have no land to live on, so they had to end up moving. So then they go to another world that has a land of storms, and that land of storms ended up becoming the land of war. So it wasn't really habitable for peaceful living. And so that's where you get into the fourth world, which is our world. And so this is, in a sense, what you consider like the fourth world. We're in the fourth world in our creation stories and everything of, humans coming together and trying to, I guess you can say, like, we're in a testing pod, I guess you can say, of consciousness and existence to be able to see what humans do with free will. And because if you really think about it, we are the only beings on this planet that have imagination. We can grow, we can do all these different things. And why we have like these certain connections with the spiritual world, we can grow our minds, we can grow everything we need to. And so throughout time, we started out as very kind of spiritual beings, but kind of throughout time, we lost that connection, we lost those abilities. And to now where we are now today, to where, the concept of the spiritual world is almost foreign to us. And so originally what I think we were created for is to be able to become, in a sense, like avatars, like from Last Airbender, and to be able to go to those different worlds and heal them and be one with the spiritual world, but in a sense, be humans with superpowers, I guess you can say. But evil and darkness came along to corrupt and stop that. So that's where you have a lot of people there. I would say they're doing a good job, because a lot of people have lost that connection to spirituality, to where everybody's worried about work. Mm-hmm. What do you do every day? You work a 9 to 5 every single day to make a paycheck just to survive, when surviving was a human right that everybody had. We didn't have to, do all these crazy things to make money just to survive. Everybody would be able to do that. There's all these distractions. You got movies, you got TV, you got phones, video games, all these certain things.
Huge rise of gambling again, too.
Yeah, gambling, too, like drug addiction, alcohol, all these certain things that kind of happen to be able to distract you from, everyday life. And it's just like, I look at, I don't want to really get too much into politics and everything, but you see all this crazy shit that's happening. And it's just like, why is all of this a problem? Why are we still fighting each other? Why are we still in wars? Why are we doing all this stuff instead of progressing humanity to what it could be? Imagine if everybody, got along, free education, free food, nobody had to starve. Everybody collabed and worked together and expanded their minds to be able to, traverse the stars like our ancestors did, traverse these worlds and grow and, do all these amazing things. But fuck no, we're worried about taxes and, what our next meal is going to be, or like what the next episode of this TV show is going to be, and that's where like it gets really deep. And I'm just like, all right, I need to have a smoke,
I mean, there's definitely power, and there's power within corruption and splitting of people. So, I mean, that's going to be one of those things that these reptilian-minded individuals are always going to intend to do, because they're going to be making profit off of war. They're going to have power off the division. And until they stop trying to exist within that reptilian mindset of the material world and want to transition as a whole, then unfortunately, I feel like it's going to be this battle that we're always going back and forth between, that the average citizen wants to move past this, and then the people that have the control currently don't want to give up that control, so they just keep retightening up those grips. And it's going to be one of those things where I've always talked about this idea of like revolution, that whenever like the new revolution cycles through, it's called a revolution because it's just going to be this continuous cycle. Because I feel like we might get to a point where there's this like great utopian society, but it's only inevitable before somebody who's corrupt tries to come into something and restarts the cycle back over again. But I mean, talking about, oops, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, that's where you had the creator step in and be like, I gave you guys a chance, you guys failed, restart. The great floods, you know, catastrophes that happen, you know, they would send meteors and stuff like that, and he would destroy, like, you know, that they say they had lands of Atlantis and stuff like that, to where we were like, we were close to it, but then like somewhere along the path we just went down darkness. And, you know, all these crazy things started happening. And, you know, like that's where, you know, they always say there always has to be a balance of things, but you always have to, you know, when one takes over the other, there has to be a reset to where the balance comes back again, kind of thing.
I mean, at that point, it almost seems like, as messed up as it sounds, we're almost like inevitable for something else because, you know, kind of diving into, again, the background of all these connecting stories. You brought up like the floods, you brought up like, you know, all these different worlds that we had supposedly went through. And I definitely think that there's one of those things that, you know, people want to think that the Great Flood exists within folklore, but every single culture talks about it. So at this point, it's like, if you start taking the literal sense of all these stories and reading between the lines, like there was something that happened, and us coming into like a new world, how that started, however you want to view it. I mean, whether it can be spiritual or a little bit more literal, you know, at least kind of breaking down some of these like old, particularly like native folklore stories. It seems to be this like weird blend where there's things that are very metaphorical and then there's things that are extremely literal. So it's like, you don't know necessarily which way to take it. You know, you talk about coming into this new world. Could it have been just a matter of like, all this crazy stuff's happening, let's go underground, a couple generations pass, you come back up? Or is it a continuation that you're going through these other spiritual realms? Like, it's hard to differentiate whether it's literal or metaphorical just because of, again, like the differentiation within these stories. Like, which way do you take them? You know, it's hard to know.
I mean, like, it's hard because, like, whether that be like we did have written history about it, and then just somewhere along the lines, evil just burned it. Like you like enticed a physical person to go burn down a sacred library or something. And we did have accounts of these certain things. And just like even thinking about just stuff that happened 500-600 years ago, people debate about it. You know, they're like, did this actually happen? You know, like it's written here, but it's interpreted differently from this person over here, you know?
Like 80 years ago, people are debating World War II and whether or not like all the other, everything happened with World War II. That's like 80 years ago.
Yeah. And if you think to the creation of human beings, there's like almost no way that people could legitly confirm, you know, like this is where we came from. It's like, there's no way in hell everybody would be able to remember that, because it would get little bits and pieces of the stories get lost and missing and stuff. And so that's one thing, like, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to have those oral teachings and history from my grandparents who were taught, you know, from generations ago, all the way to how they have those creation stories and everything. But even then, like, some of those stories get lost, but they get rekindled because we have spiritual people that go and speak to these spiritual deities for themselves, and then they rekindle and tell their stories again. And so then, you know, we pick up those stories again from them themselves and everything. So that's where, like, that can, it's when humanity 100% completely loses their spirituality is when things start going haywire and bad. And so that's like one of our prophecies that we have in our tribe is we'll lose our language, we'll lose our ceremonies, we'll lose our traditions and stuff like that. So in a sense, that's why, like, I created my YouTube channel, is to draw interest into the younger generation, to ask those questions, to go ask their elders, you know, is it true what this man says about this video? Is it true what this man says about this deity? Tell me a story, to initiate those conversations of dialogue with their elders, to tell those stories and everything.
See, I'm really glad that you're out here doing this type of stuff, because the last guy that I had on, Tom, his whole thing and the reason why he got into doing all this type of stuff was basically to try to set the record straight on a lot of this stuff, because so many people are just out here playing telephone with a lot of these native stories. And just out of curiosity too, as far as like the native oral storytelling tradition goes, I know that at least with a lot of people telling stories, it's like somebody tells a story and then they try to retell that story. They try to retell that story. People lose pieces. People start adding some extra flair to it. So at least like within like your tradition, is it very punctual as far as like, this is exactly what's in the tale? Or do you notice that people will kind of take liberties with things?
So it kind of depends on who you talk to. Some people will have different versions of it. So that's why I love to try to listen to as many versions as I can, because at least the more versions that you have, there's some similarities with each and every one of those stories. And I get those similarities, and that's how I create the new story in a sense. Like I pick up like how we're talking about the great floods, how we're talking about certain calamities and stuff like that. Yeah, those are all like when you go across different faiths and religions and beliefs across the world, there's similarities. So you pick those, and it's just like, okay, you know, this connects with this connects with this, and then you, in a sense, you create that spider web of knowledge and stuff like that. And so, like, this story went about it like this one went about it like this, but they both have this in similarity and commonality and everything too. So that's why it's always good to go to like to speak to different elders. It's good to speak to different people, like how you and I are talking. You know, like people who are listening and everything, they get two different perspectives. And so from the things that you and I are both talking about, they can get like, hey, you know, that reminds me of this story that I have over here. Then they go tell somebody else, and they go tell somebody else.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And we are back to the show. Let's hop right in. Oh, well, like, I guess also, too, I meant to ask this way earlier, but it's just something to set the record straight, at least. So, kind of not getting back too far into the Skinwalker stuff, but a lot of people, when they tell that, they talk about how the person that becomes the Skinwalker will start off basically as, like, an evil medicine man. And then you brought up a little bit later the other aspect of like medicine men getting involved with them. So just to kind of break apart some of the telephone that's being played, do you specifically have to be a medicine man to become a Skinwalker, or can anybody become a Skinwalker? You don't have to become a medicine man first, just to clarify.
So there's levels of being a medicine man. So somebody asked me, they're like, how do they word it? But pretty much my answer to them was, when you go to a doctor, there's different specialities in the medical field. You have neurosurgeons, you have dermatologists, you have, botanists or whatever that makes, then you have pharmacists and everything. Same thing with medicinal people. There's different types of medicinal people when it comes to specialities and everything. Like I was saying with my brother, he deals with the darkness and evil. We also have medicine men that doctor people. We have medicine men that, give you good blessings. They, all these other different things that kind of mix and blend together. And so to become a Skinwalker, you in a sense have to be a basic level medicine man. You have to know the songs. You have to know how to work energy. You have to know how to do, basic stuff like that. So in a sense, you become... The basic requirements are entry-level medicine man, I guess you have to say.
But I mean, at that point, it's like if you had somebody with you that knows how to do the ritual, you could theoretically become one if you had somebody walking you through the ritual, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's like what the whole origin was like medicine men in training that didn't want to, take a shortcut. Whole years. Yeah, a shortcut pretty much to... becoming a PhD neurologist, and so they wanted to take the associate's program instead of the, bachelor's degree kind of thing.
Yeah, take that shortcut. I don't want to do that extra time. Are you kidding me?
I got my certification. I'll be a doctor, So yeah, to kind of put it in like relatable terms that somebody would understand,
And I would definitely love to be able to dive into a lot more folklore and stuff with you. I usually try to keep it about an hour and a half, so it's a little bit more digestible for the listeners, and I don't want to open up a whole other can of worms. But if you're interested, man, I would definitely love to have you come back on. We can dive some more into some other different folklore, because I still want to dive into, I guess, some of the other experiences and everything that you've collected as far as, people that they've experienced on like the reservation and everything. But at least to kind of wrap up stuff today, I guess before we get into words of wisdom, I'm going to add something a little bit different here, and maybe we can address this more on the next episode, which is why I was kind of bringing that up a little bit. At least coming from somebody who, sees all this stuff from your perspective. Before we start wrapping stuff up, is there anything else folklore-wise that you want to kind of like set the record straight on, that you hear a lot of people just completely mixing it up or playing telephone with it?
The main thing is Wendigos and Skinwalkers are not the same thing. That's like the biggest thing I always run into the comments for. Different beings, they're similar, but different beings for sure. Yeah, and Skinwalkers mainly are in the Navajo Nation. So if you're in Boston, you're fine, but you'll probably be dealing with the spiritual deities over there. Which honestly, if you're like close to Appalachian Mountains, you know, probably even more crazier than what Skinwalkers can do.
And you mentioned, I guess this is kind of another quick follow-up question. So you'd mentioned that there are other beings that are essentially skinwalkers, but for other cultures. Have you picked up any of the names of any of these things? Like, are there other common names that people are kind of aware of that these things are facading under? Like, what are some of the names for these things?
That's something that is a handicap for me, or like a crutch for me, is I haven't really traveled that much to other tribes to be able to learn it. Like pretty much everything that I know, like anomalous from Mexico, is pretty much the only one that I know of that's pretty similar to Skinwalker and everything. So other tribes, like they're still at the point to where like they're still worried and scared to talk about it. So you know, it takes a strong person to be able to talk about evil deities, because you know when you talk about them, you know you're kind of inviting them over and stuff. So I haven't gotten to that point yet. So like in the future, when I start traveling and you know going to different tribes and different races and religions across the world, you know I'm pretty sure I'll be able to give you a whole catalog and book of you know similar beings and deities and stuff. So that's something that's definitely on the future for me, that what I want to try to do and stuff.
Hey man, that'd be an awesome book. I would definitely have to pick that one up. I was gonna throw in, man, like Layla Chusa might be one that's pretty close, or at least somewhat maybe within the same family. Because I mean, it's a witch that can turn into an owl, and I know it's only one creature, but it still seems like it's kind of somewhat in the same category.
Yeah, shapeshifter for sure. And so that's something that, you know, like it's shapeshifting is a huge thing. And so, you know, it's like humans can do a backflip. You know, you're called a gymnast and everything. So it gets a little specific and stuff like that. But yeah, that's something I really want to go and travel and be able to get those stories, you know, because most of the time, like I only speak on stuff I know, you know, so people would ask me like, can you do a Wendigo video? Can you do a video on Dogman? I'm just like, I'm sorry, I've never experienced these guys before. So it's just like, I would be in a sense continuing on that telephone, you know, rumors of everything instead of giving you a real concrete story of like how I did with the Skinwalkers and stuff like that. So that's something that like, hopefully in the future I can meet people who have experienced these things in real life and they can tell the true story of what they actually are.
So I guess that like a skinwalker isn't necessarily like a cryptid, even though people kind of put it in that category, and you've kind of differentiated that even more so today, so people can kind of know the difference, that it doesn't really fit in that category. But I know you brought up Dogman, you brought up Wendigos. Are there any, because I know that you guys probably don't deal with Sasquatch or anything like that, or any type of like ape men or anything, but is there any other like cryptid type creatures that you guys kind of deal with in that area?
Bigfoot is one, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we actually have a clan in the Navajo Nation of the Bigfoot clan. So they are spiritual deities that we have more so in the mountainous areas of the reservation, the foresty areas, and they're more so in the sense of similar to how extraterrestrial and star beings are. You kind of let them be, you know, and then they show up and they're able to jump dimensions, I guess you can say. They can jump in the physical and the spiritual world too. So that's like when people would like find Bigfoot footprints, you know, they would see them only go so far, then they would disappear, is because that's when they transitioned over back into the spiritual world and stuff. They came over to be able to get herbs, medicines, or do offerings and doing their own stuff too. So we have Bigfoot ceremonies and stuff and everything. I know a couple of medicine men that go out, and their sole purpose is to be able to give offerings and sing songs to the Bigfoot tribe and stuff like that out there too. So I've never met them before. I've only heard of them. But they're, you know, I have one experience of we went to a ceremony out there in those mountains and stuff. And we actually saw, you know, I went out for a bathroom break, and me and my brother were just taking a leak outside near the forest edge. And we saw big old huge eyes and a huge, you know, hairy guy in the forest. And we were like, scared. We ran away and then, you know, continued on the ceremony and stuff. The elders told us, they're like, let him be. He's here for the ceremony. He wants to hear the music. He wants to hear the songs. So let him be and everything like that too. So we have Bigfoot over here too as well.
Do you guys kind of view them as like the lost tribe? Because I've heard a lot of differentiation with these things that, like, for example, like some people just see him strictly as like almost like the lost tribe, like they're like another group of people. And then on the other side, like my grandma was Cherokee and I grew up there telling me stories about how like the medicine man would go and he would like play a specific song and sing a specific song and it would draw him in. And then he would sing and play this other song and it would basically show him that it was okay. And then if the Sasquatch wanted to, it would come up and they would touch fingers and then they would bestow them knowledge for the year of any floods that are going to happen, where they should farm, where they should do this, where they should do that. And I know that's like the Cherokee background of like I said, what I grew up hearing. But then on the other side, you hear about like the Nantinaq, like the stuff up towards like Alaska and stuff. And again, they view them just strictly more as like another group of people. But where does like the Navajo viewpoint on that kind of land? Is it like in between, or is it kind of?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to that. Like we know that there's a bunch of them out there. We know that they kind of do their own thing. And they're kind of worried and scared of, what humans would do. And it's just like that. That's why they kind of keep to themselves, along with like we have stories of little people too. They're the same thing. They're like just small people that kind of run around and live underground and stuff, or in the forest and everything. And, they in a sense are a race of spiritual and physical beings that can kind of go in between and stuff, like what humans used to do. But we lost our way in some point in time. And so they're like, these guys can be dangerous. So let's just like keep to ourselves. They're of higher consciousness or of higher conscious beings and stuff. So they understand and know that. So that's why they kind of keep their distance. And with us, like they're our relatives. We see them as that, and like how you're mentioning with that's very interesting. It's pretty much the same stuff of how we interact, with the Bigfoot out that we have out here too. And that goes in the ceremonies and stuff too. So, it's more so of like just respecting their space, that's a lot of things. That's a lot of like the pretty much the gist. If anyone's going to be watching this, is just like stay in your, stay in where you're supposed to be in your zone. Like if you venture out, you're going into someone else's territory, and be respectful.
Ain't that the truth? That's universal with beings, with normal people, with anything. Like be respectful when you're in somebody else's territory.
Exactly, man. So heck yeah, dude.
Well, I guess this kind of partly will lead into the next conversation, hopefully, because again, I could go for Sasquatch and little people for another 2 hours. So I guess this is a good little sprinkle at the end to know something we can get into for next time, man.
Hell yeah, man. I look forward to it, man. Thank you so much for having me on. Like, this is what I love about some of these podcasts. Is just like really good educational, thought-provoking conversations I have with people. Like I just met you today, so it's just like it's really good, and it's a blessing to be able to meet someone who has a consciousness and thought process and respect that you have. And so I wanted to say thank you for that, man.
Well, I greatly appreciate it, man. And honestly, the same goes back for you, man. I'm glad that you were like open communicating all this stuff. I'm glad that you were, ready and prepared to share some of this stuff with your background and some of the stuff that you've been through, man. And again, man, I just appreciate you making the time to come on the show, being the first Navajo voice that's had a chance to come on the show. So that's always going to hold a special place in my heart, my friend.
Hell yeah. More to come in the future for sure.
Hoping so, man. Good entryway in to know that, man, I'm really excited for the next one, because I know that next time we'll be able to easily go for 2 hours, and maybe we can do another one past that, man.
For sure, man. We'll go live and we'll just bring a bunch of people in.
It'll be perfect.
Right?
Stay tuned, guys. This is our last break. But if you enjoyed the show and think I deserve it, please leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcatcher you use. Your continued support is what makes this show possible, and your opinions go a long way to help the show grow and improve. So thank you. Now feel free to skip past these ads so we can get back to the show. Now back with that deep conversation you crave. So I always like to kind of wrap up the show with words of wisdom before we get into links and where everybody can find you. So if there's any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners today, man, what might it be?
Pretty much just be respectful, be mindful. We live in a day and age that's very hard to live and survive. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of dark energy out there. Remember to love. Remember to share laughter. Remember we're all humans, no matter what skin color, no matter what race, no matter where you come from. We could do better. We can be better, so always remember that. And always remember you're here on this earth for a short period of time. live it up the best you can for the future generations and make it better for them too.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. We live in a world where it feels like it's full of darkness, but you got to follow the light, man. If you find like a little glimmer of light somewhere, chase that thing down and get every last little bit of light you can get out of that, and just enjoy the time that you got, man, because you never know when your last day, when your last minute might be. So you got to just enjoy every single moment you possibly can.
For sure. Yeah, that was me today. I had a stressful day at work, but you cheered up my day, man. Thank you so much for that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That goes both ways, actually. I had a long, stressful day at work, man, but I've been waiting for this show for a long time. So really excited we're able to do it and elevate both of our moods, man.
Sweet. That's awesome, bro.
And if anybody wanted to come and find you, they wanted to come and find your YouTube channel, or maybe they're possibly somebody who's Navajo and they want to share some of the stories that they've taken in to kind of help you kind of fill in the pieces and everything. Where might people be able to find you, and where might people be able to contact you?
So I have a YouTube channel at Shanclen Shadow Productions. You can find me there for all my tales, ghosts, and paranormal investigations I got coming up. I also have a second channel that I just made. It's called Shanclen Shadow Lodge on YouTube as well. If you want to get away from darkness and evil and scariness, over there is where I tell stories from other people. I have examples. I have music videos I've made for some of my bros I grew up in high school with. I made for them. I got examples of, one of my in-laws making this turquoise ring. He's a silversmith, and him telling his stories of how to be a silversmith and stuff. I play video games. We have a podcast over there, just love and laughter and everything over there. But I also have an Instagram too, at official_Shanclen_SSP, official Shanclen SSP. You'll be able to find me there. If you have any questions, you can DM me on there too. I post my daily shenanigans, what I'm up to, working out and stuff, and updates on everything. So yeah, you can find me there, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, come have a chat with me.
Oh yeah, man. I'll make sure that I include all those links down in the show description so everybody can find it quick and easy. And man, I can't say it enough. I appreciate you making the time to come on today. And again, I'm looking forward to next time.
I know. I'm already looking forward to the next time, man. Thank you for having me on, man. And many blessings to you and all your listeners, man.
Same to you, man.
If you guys enjoyed today's conversation and want to show some love, smash that follow icon and share today's episode with a friend. Grassroots support from listeners like you is exactly how this show grows. So thank you guys. And if anyone would like to get in touch with me for any other reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the ones that I'm the most active on, or through the submission form, which is available on the top of the link tree, which is available down in the show notes. Or you guys can also call in or text the hotline, and that number is 313-364-1551. And if you guys have some free time, don't forget to check out the awesome friends of the show, IKNOWSQUATCH, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Cryptoteeology, and Big Ape Threads, and our friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, Oregon-ite, and Mule, with additional discounts and credits available. More information on those is available down in that show description. And every single thing I mentioned throughout the show is all available on the link tree, which again is available down in that show description. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with Mike talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking